Welcome to the World Report Economic Update. Global debt hits a record $237 trillion, up $21 trillion in the past year alone. But first, will the petrodollar be replaced by the petro yuan, the China, Russia, Iranian anti-dollar alliance? More, this is a story that I don't think many people are talking about. The greenback, the U.S. dollar, has always been dominant in trading of oil and commodities worldwide. Well, this new China, Russia, Iranian alliance is threatening that with the petro yuan.
Well,
how concerned should we be?
I would say Russia, China, Iran is just going along for the ride because they're using Iran to dominate the Middle East. I mean, just as an aside, what most people don't realize, the only guy that could have stopped Iran from not being the dominant power against all Arab countries in the Middle East, Sunnis and Shias, was
Saddam
Hussein, the dictator, vicious dictator. But he was the wall against Iran. As long as they were killing each other, things were doing fine. You know, they had an 8-year war in the 1980s where Iraq actually attacked Iran, and the thing turned out to be, they weren't able to do it. And then our good friend George W. Bush, when he became president, he decided he was going to go into Iraq and get rid of Saddam Hussein. The man had no concept at all of my opinion, that George W. Bush was probably one of the most ignorant people to be in the White House in our modern history. He knew nothing. He talked to people, and like you and I were talking about, he wouldn't know what he was talking about. He didn't understand the history of what goes on in the Middle East. He was a nice guy. I think the thing that sold him to the voters was the fact that he was running against Al Gore originally after Clinton.
Yes.
After Clinton took everything he could out of the White House that wasn't
nailed down.
Now nailed down, exactly, or sold. So George W. Bush meant well, but he was incapable of understanding foreign policy.
If the petro yuan, if oil becomes traded in yuan and rubles, and they stop using the U.S. dollar, what does that mean to the greenback?
I don't think it means a lot. I really don't. I think we are potentially going to be one of the big oil and natural gas producers and distributors in the world. A lot of people don't know that. We're now shipping, the last figures I have, we're shipping 1.5 million to 2 million barrels a day, which is really something, because before we
exporting,
yes. As a matter of fact, fracking, it was something known about for 50 years, but it became very cost effective. And now this is a commodity that is really going big time. And the industry in which I'm still active, the pipe valve fitting industry, those guys are all making money hand over fist, because that's before you even have a production situation. A lot of private money going into the big oil companies that they themselves are doing what the government used to do.
Now, the Saudis have just recently come out and said that they're pushing for $80 a barrel. Is that realistic?
Not at this time. I think it's going to hang in right now as we speak. It's about $65 a barrel. I don't think
which is up quite significally over the past 2 years.
At the end of 2014, oil was $105 a barrel. Light oil, the one what we call West Texas Intermediate light oil, was $105, and Brent crude, which is made in most of the rest of the world, which is very heavy oil and needs a lot of refining, that was about 20% higher. Well, then when the United States, ironically, when fracturing came into the picture, the United States went from 3.5 million barrels produced to 10.5 million. That just shook up OPEC to the extent that it just brought the value down. They went down so fast you couldn't even imagine. It was all the way down into the 30s at one point, and then it settled in. Then they say, "Oh, don't worry, it'll come back." Well, it's come back little by little, up to 40. Now it's about as high it's been in a few years, but I don't think it's going to go much higher because we're capable in this country of producing a lot more now through the fracturing method, and the Russians and the Saudis have a deal in OPEC not to overproduce. Well, this is price of middle 60s and about high 60s for Brent crude is only done because Russia and the Saudis, who along with the United States are the world's major producers in the world, have decided to cut back a little bit. I mean, they cheat and so on.
Well, and the Saudis need oil to go higher. It's the only commodity they have.
Yeah, no matter
and
what.
Russia, too.
Russia, that's right, oil and natural gas. Remember, Russia has these pipelines that they developed when the satellites were controlled by the Soviet Union. And that goes all the way from the end of the Second War in 1945 to 1990. So they had 45 years. Actually, the guy that is in charge of the Russian pipelines going into Central Europe, especially Germany, was a former chancellor of Germany. So it's all about the money situation.
Speaking of money, global debt has just hit a record $237 trillion. We just spent $600 billion in a deficit.
Billion.
Billion. $600 billion deficit in the first 6 months of the year. And most countries are in a debt deficit situation. We're at 21 trillion, racing forward to 22 trillion. At some point, do we have to stop the gap, or do we just call it a bankruptcy and call the chips on the table? What happens here?
I don't think anybody is doing anything about it. The only
They're not.
We cut taxes, that's fine, but that means as we cut taxes, the debt goes up. The only advantage we have, there's a very large segment of that amount is here in the United States. We don't owe it to other nations. We owe it to our own people that have bought U.S. Treasury bills. You notice they have stayed very stable. They haven't, the yield hasn't gone up at all. The price hasn't gone down very much. It's been very, very stable.
And have you noticed the Chinese have been making noise about stopping buying our treasuries because of this whole tariff thing going on?
That is just a hogwash as far as I'm concerned, because everything the Chinese have done, they've done for their benefit. So any changes they make is only done to benefit. It isn't like they were doing wonderful things and now they're going to stop doing it. They're just going to change the way they do things, that's all. China puts a lot of money here in the United States, because they have an interest in their business, and that's the more.
And the best place to put your money is here.
Here, well, because of the security. The United States is still probably the most secure major country in the world. What other country? I mean, what, Russia? God only knows what can happen. Sure, you got Vladimir Putin, the dictator. China now is smart enough. You know, the one thing, I admit to being a Sinophile. I really respect them. They decided, look, we got a good guy there right now, Xi Jinping. Let's stay with him, and let's have some stability. Deng Xiaoping in 1980, who had been put in jail by Mao Zedong, is a guy that said, it's good to be wealthy, it's good to have people make money, because that's got to be our future. And that's when China started picking things up in 1980.
That's our energy and economy segment.